Hey guys, hope everybody's doing well. Welcome to this video. I didn't make a video last week, just was so busy with work. I was so happy to be home and off the road traveling that I just didn't get to a video. Just wanted to play music and relax. So sorry for no video last week, but I am back and I'm very happy to be here to talk about one of my all-time favorite artists, Nick Drake. It really is a love story for me, you know. My memories of discovering this guy go back to, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago or so, when I was buying CDs, really. And in fact, and now that I'm thinking of it, the very first exposure I ever had, believe it or not, to Nick Drake was a car commercial, probably about a decade ago. I think it was Volkswagen. Did a car commercial that featured a song that I had never heard before. It was Pink Moon. And, you know, obviously they were going for a night drive, and, you know, it was just a perfect song for what they were trying to accomplish in that advertising piece. And immediately had to find out who sang that song, and it wasn't quite as easy back then. You know, we didn't have instant access to YouTube. You know, maybe we did, but I wasn't, you know, very savvy when it came to internet. I wasn't on Facebook or anything, you know. I was kind of a late bloomer when it came to that, so I just had to do my research and go ask people, you know, where is that song and who is it? Finally, I found the right person who told me who it was, and I remember actually downloading a compilation of his called Way to Blue, I believe it was. And immediately, you know, not only Pink Moon, but every song on there was, to me, just incredible. And it began a now probably 10 to 12 year love affair with Nick Drake. It's a really tragic story when it comes to his very painfully short recording career in life. As most of you probably know, Nick Drake passed away when he was 26 years old of an apparent suicide. You know, diagnosed, not really officially, but most people who knew him claim he was clinically depressed and was on medication to try to handle his depression, but eventually it did catch up to him. So it's just a really, really sad story, but I don't want to dwell too much on that, what caused the death and all that led up to it. I really just want to focus on the music, like I tend to like to do all the time. And I just wanted to show you that even before I got back into the vinyl craze about 8-9 years ago, I went out and purchased what I could find on CD. Started with a compilation here called Made to Love Magic. This contained most of his better known songs, rather short really, about 13 tracks on compact disc, and absolutely loved it. So then I took it a step further and said I want to get all the studio albums on compact disc, so I went and did that. I'm going to show you the vinyl in detail, so I'm not going to really talk too much about the CDs. But then I also found this, and this happens to be hard to find now. This is a compilation from other artists, I guess it was. You know, probably people I've never heard of before, if I'm being honest with you. I'm looking at this now, and I just don't recognize any of these people, but this is a compilation here called Sculpting from Drake. It says Volume 1, but as I don't think there was ever a Volume 2. But this is really nice. I mean, it's a beautifully packaged CD, first of all, and it's very appropriate for the music of Nick Drake. So, Sculpting from Drake, Volume 1. Don't think there was ever a Volume 2. If you can find it, it's definitely nice to have. So I would recommend this CD, and of course we're going to go over his very brief recording life of 3 albums, and I have some other compilations on vinyl I want to show you. So Nick Drake, born in, I believe, Great Britain. People refer to him as English, so I believe he was born also in Great Britain. Could be wrong, but I know he did pass away in England, so pretty sure he was British. And the amazing thing about it is as far as I know, there's no known footage of him performing. There's nothing on YouTube. I've looked and looked. I read on Wikipedia that there is no known live footage from him, either on television or someone had recorded him live. There just is nothing. And it's really quite sad because, the biggest tragedy out of all of this is that he was never able to enjoy his success. Because when his albums were released, they were really quite poorly performed. They did not do well on the charts, and they did not produce singles, and he was not well known whatsoever. So that's very unfortunate to have a story like that where someone was not able to see how loved and how much their music has meant to so many people, not just fans, ordinary people like myself, but people like Robert Smith and David Sylvian from Japan, and as I said, Robert Smith from The Cure and R.E.M., and so many people call him an influence. Here's another one, John Martin, that goes way back. But John Martin, his music was drafted to, pretty much mirror Nick Drake's career. And, it's quite interesting. They were on the same label. And this CD, is just a great introduction to John Martin. It's my first introduction to John Martin. I'm still relatively new to that artist. But it was about in the late 70s, early 80s where people started to really discover his music. Island Records decided to release a box set that I don't have called Family Tree, and that was kind of a reissuing of all of his albums, and from there it just kind of snowballed, and year after year after year the legacy has just grown, and people have come out of the woodwork like myself to discover him much, much later, after he passed away in 1974. And I didn't even know until I started researching this video that a song I've loved for 30 years. This album here by the Dream Academy contains a song called Life in a Northern Town. And, anybody who's British probably knows this song. This was a #1 hit in America even. Kind of a one-hit wonder for this band, but the song Life in a Northern Town was written for and dedicated to Nick Drake. So it just goes to show you that his influence has been very widespread, and it continues to this day, and I continue to find interesting things and musicians who claim to be influenced and inspired by the music of Nick Drake. As I said, there's only 3 albums to go over, so this isn't going to be a very long video, but I do have a few fun little compilations to show you. 1969, he released an album called 5 Leaves Left, and instant classic. I mean, I shouldn't say instant, as I said, it took decades for this really to see any popularity. It's since gone gold and platinum, but back in the day, I'm reading online here, trying to research for this video, that he was receiving an allowance from Island Records of 20 pounds, British pounds a week, just to live on. That was his royalties for his first album, was 20 pounds a week. So it's just, it's tragic to think that the guy was kind of living in squalor and never saw the fruits of his labor. But this album is magical. Time Has Told Me, Riverman, Way to Blue, oh boy, The Thoughts of Mary Jane. The whole thing has just now become a classic. But, when it was released in 1969, very overlooked, didn't do much on the charts, if anything. And, it's just such a sad, sad story, but it is a magical album, and one that I'm extremely passionate about. This is a much later reissue on Simply Vinyl. I think this is probably about a decade old now. But I've babied it, taken care of it. Did come with a seam split, unfortunately, but this is a beautiful pressing on Simply Vinyl, a label I don't think exists anymore. The only thing I wish they would have done is put the original Island labels on here, but they chose to use a yellow Island label, and maybe that is original, but I thought the Island label was originally pink with like a palm tree in it. So someone correct me if I'm wrong there, but I'm almost certain that this is not an original label. But, I imagine original copies of this would probably go for big money. But that was his debut album. Followed it up here. Let me make sure I get the years right. It's very important to me to do that. 1971 with an album called Brighter Later. And, the cover's very dated, obviously. And you can almost see that You know, he wasn't a very photogenic person. He wasn't a very charismatic kind of guy. You read, you know, researching this video again, people commenting on his persona was very withdrawn, not talkative. You know, he'd go the entire day and not say a word. Didn't like communication, didn't like to be interviewed. And part of the reason that, you know, people claim that he was not successful is he refused to do interviews for these albums. You know, this is long before the days of online stuff, but, you know, even press, you know, print media, he wouldn't do that. And, you know, I think it damaged his popularity, you know, initially. Again, fantastic record. Hazy Jane Part 2 is on this record, and 1 for that matter. Title track, Brighter Later, Poor Boy, beautiful, longer track there. And Northern Sky, again, you know, it's each of these albums is only about 30 minutes, but it's just so wonderful. And this is, again, a much later reissue, but I believe this is an original replica of the Island label. So that's probably what an original Island label would look like, but the reissues are done very lovingly and very nice, and they sound wonderful, so there's no real reason for me to hunt down original copies of this, but as I said, if, you know, they didn't sell well, so I would guess that original copies of this would be very hard to find and very expensive. And then finally his final studio album came in 1972, an album called Pink Moon, and that was the first song, as I mentioned earlier, that I had ever heard from Nick Drake. And this is a fantastic record as well. Didn't produce as many, like if you're looking at compilations, the first 2 albums pretty much you're going to find on any compilation. They're, you know, considered greatest hits now, really. And this one, maybe there'll be a few songs that would not be considered on compilations, perhaps. But I like this record an awful lot. And I know people in the vinyl community absolutely love this record. I love the cover. It's a gorgeous, gorgeous piece of music. And let's just quickly look at the label here. Again, much later reissues on this. Yeah, this is again on that replica original Island label, which I really like. You know, it just is a real throwback kind of look to it. And they even went so far in the inner sleeves to kind of replicate the dirty original, because, you know, again, I just don't think many of these copies existed. So the one that they're probably going on probably had a lot of shelfware. So, you know, it's interesting how they duplicated that. So those are his 3 studio albums from 69 to 72. He'd be a very easy artist to collect. He's a very easy artist to love because it's perfect nighttime music. It's perfect uplifting music. It is really, really something special. I mean, there's very few artists I think that can move me like Nick Drake has moved me over the years. And I'll just go through the compilations. There are various reasons why the estate of Nick Drake has released these. I guess I'm going to go a little out of order because this is a 2013 Record Store Day compilation, and I haven't even opened it, if I'm being honest with you, because I'm not sure if there's much need, you know, because I have so much other stuff. But this was an originally American-only compilation done by the label in 1971 to try to push out his music, to promote his first 2 albums prior to Pink Moon. Did miserable. Didn't really do anything to help his popularity. You know, this was an exact replica, basically, of the 1971 release for Record Store Day. I am tempted to open it because there's some cool stuff in here. On the hype sticker, it says an authentic reproduction of the 1971 U.S. compilation, remastered by John Wood, one of the original people who worked with Nick Drake. It does contain, a poster and album history, and it's very heavy, extremely heavy for just a single disc. But, you know, I think as far as the music goes, there isn't that much unique in here. This is, if you got an original of this, I'm sure it's quite rare and expensive, but this one here just has tracks that I've heard. So I'm just going to elect to keep this sealed for now. Not sure it's worth anything, really. Record Store Days stuff seems to kind of come and go as far as prices. Some of the stuff escalates highly in price, and other stuff you can find it cheaper later. As you can see, I just bought this on Record Store Day for $25. So anyway, that's one of his compilations. Then going back to, I guess, somewhat of an order here, he released this compilation in 2004. Again, I have the CD as I showed you. This is called Made to Love Magic. I'm just going to read this here to you. It's a compilation of outtakes and remixed tracks by English songwriter Nick Drake, notable for featuring previously unreleased solo acoustic version of Riverman. So obviously I love that track. This has got a solo acoustic version of Riverman that's different from the album version. Previously unheard song from Drake's final recording session in 1974 called Toe the Line, which is nice. So, you know, there's always one or two small reasons to keep buying these compilations, but as a collector, that's a reason enough for me. But at least there are a couple unique tracks on here where I don't think that the Nick Drake compilation has anything unique about it as far as music goes. This one here is a custom label here, still on Island Records, but much more modern looking label there. I have played this and it sounds lovely, and I don't know if it's rare. Probably not. I wouldn't think, and I'm not sure if I showed you the gatefold already or not. I think I had. So anyway, just a couple more things to show you here. I'm just trying to explain why there's so many different little variety of compilations. Here's one that was released back in 2004 again, called A Treasury. This one's still in shrink. Probably have had it for 8 years, maybe, something like that. A Nick Drake compilation aimed at the audiophile audience, released in October 2004. It's available as a hybrid multi-channel Super Audio CD and 180-gram vinyl. So again, there's really nothing unique about this. Same songs as you've heard on the albums, but again, it's just a nice collectible item to have, but you know, if you're just looking for just a handful of songs from Nick Drake, that might be nice for you. But with only 3 albums, I would say just try to get his albums, because they've been reissued multiple times and there's box set formats of it. There's all different variations of it. And then finally, I've got an album that was released in 2007. And there are some interesting things about this one, Family Tree. What's interesting about this is you hear, I'm just going to read it to you so I don't miss anything. Family Tree is a compilation album of home recordings by Nick Drake. The album is notable for appearances of Nick Drake's sister, Gabrielle, on one track, and the contribution of 2 original songs performed by Nick Drake's mother, Molly Drake, who, you know, recently she put out her own album, actually, of very old material, obviously, but she's got a lovely voice. I did not buy that. I should have probably bought that, but it you know, very old-fashioned, you know, it's just like a little grandma singing kind of music, but, you know, gotta give her credit. She had a lovely voice, and she did write her own songs, and, you know, it's quite good, and there's a couple of tracks from her singing, Nick Drake's mother, Molly, singing on this record. Recorded before the release of his first album, 5 years left. Most of these tracks on the album circulated on bootlegs in the years prior to the official release of this, due to the generosity of Drake's family for sharing them with fans. The album reached number 35 on Billboard's top independent albums chart, and helped making Drake's first album to chart in America. So, you know, it's just a really nice thing to have. Again, released in 2007, and home recordings, you know, it was just kind of done with the family. So again, as a collector and lover of Nick Drake, this is a real nice collector's piece. I think it's available also on CD. So that's my very brief look at Nick Drake. I wish, like so many others, that there was more material and a lifetime of albums that I could be sitting here talking to you about, but unfortunately that is it. And he left us tragically early. And I really, really feel for him and his family for all these years of loss. And, you know, this is just my little tribute and appreciation of, you know, at least a decade of really, really one of my very, very favorite artists. I can listen to at any time, and I find him to be soothing and comforting, and his voice is just like silk. And, you know, it's just, he wrote very simple songs in a way, because they're very folk-based, but the lyrics and the passion that he sang with and just the simplicity of it is very, very appealing to me. So I hope this video inspires a few of you who don't know Nick Drake to go check out his music, because you won't be disappointed. And yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. So thanks for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll be back as soon as possible with something new. And until then, take care of yourselves, enjoy your weekend, and bye for now.
saw it written and I saw it say